All right, here we go.
Ooh,
Welcome to another episode of the Non-Victimation Podcast. And today I have Lysander Caligo,
that's
who
correct.
is a former Marine and also works with Deep End Fitness.
Correct.
And then I'm not sure if you have other projects that you're working on the side too, or if that was it.
Oh man, I'm a man of many facets, I guess I could say.
Right?
It's always very difficult for me to even introduce myself when it comes to stuff like this because if you're to like look at the board of things, I do a lot. And
Right.
that's not me trying to toot my own horn. It's just that's the direction that life has taken me.
hmm
Yeah.
That's awesome. So I just recently did one of the classes with Deep End Fitness on this last Saturday,
Yeah.
and it was incredible. It was something that, like, even though I'd had you on the podcast and we had talked about it,
Right.
it's like, I think a lot of things for people that you can sort of intellectualize what it is, but until you're actually doing it, you have no concept of really how difficult it is and how much you benefit from it.
For sure.
So like, because like you're doing certain exercises where you have to like swim a distance or you have to swim a distance underwater, you're doing all these sort of movements and then like you get kind of gassed out and you think, I can't do anymore. I'm just done,
Mhm.
right? And it's one of those things where, and you even talked about this in the last podcast, where you get to a point where you have to understand that isn't the end. That may be where your mind and your body is telling you we can't do anymore, but there is more that you
For
can do
sure.
that you're capable of.
Now let me ask you a question too.
Yes.
From start to finish, did you see an improvement?
Oh yes, definitely. Yeah, because like I hit that point where it's like I felt so worn out or just like I couldn't do anymore that I felt like I need to be done. I need to get out of this pool and stop. But I didn't do that. I made
Mhm.
sure that I stayed in and I kept going and like took it a little bit slower, but I still kept doing the things, listen to the instruction and say, okay, instead of doing it the way you're doing it because that's really inefficient, try doing it this way.
Right.
Pay attention to the things that I was being told and could start to move forward and still accomplish more.
For sure. And that's what I talked about last time too, is the amount of growth that occurs.
hmm
It's something like, uh, let's get deep into this because it's the killing of oneself.
hmm
If we're really talking about this, right?
Right.
Because, and this is where I go whenever I do discuss initiation processes. Essentially, what you are doing and what you're trying to do is you're trying to transform. Whenever you
Okay.
put yourself through these types of things, what you're doing is you're trying to transform. You want to level up.
hmm
Let's look at it like a video game.
Right.
You, when you entered that pool, you started off at level one. You just started the video game,
hmm
right? You're at this level.
hmm
And your first level, when you went across the pool, you're like still level one and you're like, I want to quit. This is hard. I'm over. But then
Yeah.
at some point, you plus up to level two,
Right.
right?
hmm
And if we can look at it in that sense, what that was a shedding of the old skin.
hmm
It was a killing of a part of yourself.
Right.
And that's the beauty of what's going on. And that's why the water is so great. This is why I love jujitsu too. And I could tell you so many stories about this as well. But the beauty of the water is just such a great equalizer, especially, and I hate to say this to you,
Uh-huh.
but especially for people like us that have been through years and years and years. We're old. I hate to say it. We're old, right? We're banged up, we're beat up, going in there and being like, oh, I'm going to go and have to wrestle like a 22-year-old wrestler that's now doing jujitsu. And yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, it's not to say that you shouldn't be doing this stuff,
Right.
but sometimes we need another environment if
Right.
we haven't been practicing in certain things.
hmm
The water is just such a good environment
Yeah.
because the water's endearing in a sense because you can go in the water and you're like, oh, it's not that bad. You can tell
hmm
yourself it's not that bad. Oh, it's comfortable. And then very quickly you're like,
Yeah.
oh wow.
Right.
Wow. This is really freaking humbling.
Yeah.
This is really freaking, oh man,
hmm
this stuff could kill me.
Right.
I'm quicksand in a way, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I'm doing good. Oh goodness. But then the next part is, and where the killing off comes from though, is it's not just the water doing it. It's your own mind,
hmm
right?
Right.
It's like the reason why I talk about this leveling up, this initiation, this initiatory thing is you had to surpass that individual, the individual that after one lap or whatever, that was panicking and saying, I need to get out, I need to quit, I need to survive.
hmm
You said, no, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to learn.
hmm
And then you learned a new thing. You learned, oh, that voice that comes in that says, quit, stop, don't do this stuff. I'm stronger than that.
hmm
I'm stronger than that. I'm going to keep going. And
Right.
that's the killing of oneself. That's the killing of one's old self. That's the shedding of an old skin and leveling up to two. Does it
Right.
make sense?
It does.
And that's what we do every week.
Yeah.
Like I said, we've had people that haven't been able to swim that look at me and they're like, I can't do this. And unfortunately, I hate when people say that they can't do stuff, but
Right.
that's the look I give them as I look at them. And no longer as a mentor do I sit there and be like, just shut up. And don't get me wrong, there's some people I do that with. Absolutely.
Right.
When the prescription is there,
Right.
but I will just give them a look of like, I've been there and know what you're going through. Just
Right.
keep going. And sometimes that look is all they need. They just lock eyes with me and I just look down at them while they're in the water and I don't say anything to them.
Uh-huh.
And they look at me and they're like, okay.
Hmm.
It's like when people are sitting there saying to you, like, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Well, you're freaking talking.
If you're talking, you're breathing.
Yeah. And what's really going on is your mind is trying to trick you into
Right.
staying at that level. And it's crazy because what we'll see even during a session, right? You're in the water for what, hour and a half?
Yeah. Something like that.
You already see the plus up.
Hmm.
And then next time you get in the pool, next time you get in the water, you're gonna be like,
Right.
okay, you're gonna have to knock some rust off again. You're gonna have to maybe go through level one again for like 10 minutes, but then
Hmm.
you're gonna be at level two. And
Right.
then level two, you're gonna be like, oh, okay, cool. Now I'm
Right.
past that. It's crazy how we'll see like people that come twice a week for 3 weeks, the improvements that they've made.
Right.
My favorite thing is seeing people that haven't been able to hit the brick. Did you get to the brick?
Yes, we got to that.
How'd that go for you?
I could do it without the brick. I could kind of maintain that motion, but holding the brick was more difficult. So,
Right. So the brick is definitely the hardest.
hmm.
That underwater crossover as well,
Right.
where a lot of people are like mid pool
Hmm.
and then they're coming up and then they hit their first crossover after trying it like 3 or 4 times. And they're
Right.
like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Like,
Yeah.
I could have pushed it. I could have pushed it those entire times. Like, those 10 times where I came up early and I freaked out, like, I could have done that.
Right.
Those are my favorites, is seeing
Hmm.
someone accomplish their first underwater crossover when they've been panicking the whole time and they're like,
Right.
cool,
Yeah.
right? And then that brick toe for sure. That brick toe is difficult because
Hmm.
that motion is very difficult.
Hmm.
Having something there, you now have to. Another thing that people get really weird about is having like half their head out of the water,
Right.
right? Where it comes just across the nostril, come across the lip, and your ears in the water, where you have to do that, and then trying to keep yourself floating. You're
Right.
like, this is weird.
Yeah.
And then you're only really swimming with one arm and having to
Hmm.
figure out this kick. And it's like all of a sudden you just feel the hips drop, you're straightening out, and then you have this weight and you're just drowning. So it's really
Right.
cool to see when people finally kind of get it and they just stick
Hmm.
with it and they're like, all right, cool. So,
Yeah.
I mean, what I'm explaining right now, for those of you that don't know this, this is just the screener aspect of our deep end fitness. The first thing we test is survivability. So that's what we put you through was,
Right.
can you survive? Because the big thing is like, if you can't survive in the pool, if you can't survive in water, there's no sense in us measuring performance.
Right.
And then once we get you to the survivability aspect where you can do an underwater crossover, you could do a brick toe, or you could do bobs, it's like, all right, now we're going to throw you in the real deep end and we're going to put you into these workouts and movements.
Hmm.
And now the level starts to plus up, right? Now you're
Right.
at like level 10, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, now I need to really step it up and keep going with this stuff. But of course, we scale everything. So,
Yeah. So I guess kind of another way to think of that is like if you can't do a push up, we're not going to have you doing burpees.
right.
You've got to have sort of a progression to get from
Absolutely.
one thing to the
Absolutely.
next. One of the most beneficial things I think that we did in the class is both at the beginning and the end, we have the circle of everybody like talking,
Yeah.
and you were very clear on not letting people just give like a basic answer.
Right.
So you would ask a question, you'd say like, "What is it you want to accomplish? Like, what's your goal?" And you push people to give like a real goal. This is not just, well, I just want to get better,
Right.
or some generic sort of answer,
Right.
and then at the end of the class it was the same sort of thing. It's like, what did you accomplish? Like, where did you go?
Right.
That's really important.
For sure. What doesn't get measured doesn't grow, right?
Right.
Essentially. So my big thing that I know, especially in, mentoring and coaching for, shoot, I mean, I think I'm past 15 years now of that, is that's the big thing that I've started to notice over years is that a lot of people want to come to these places to kind of feel good and
Hmm.
belong to a group, but
Right.
they don't want to steal the show. Like they don't want to be the center of attention. And then they don't really want to say anything that, one, will embarrass them,
Hmm.
or two, seem too cocky or arrogant outside, like what might not be kosher within a social group or social setting.
Right.
And that's what I try to break people of, because I really do think this is something that is not just within these groups, but I think it's
Right.
society wide.
Hmm.
I think a lot of people are not willing to tell the truth. They're not willing to live in reality for those exact reasons. Like I said, they don't want to be cast out from the social group, and they don't want to be held accountable.
Okay.
And those are the things that I push for
Right.
is you're going to be held accountable,
Hmm.
right? And it's not in a negative way either.
Yeah.
It's just let's start getting into practice of holding ourselves accountable and
Hmm.
having the group hold you accountable.
Right.
Let's get there,
Yeah.
right? And then let's also start making declarations of reality
Hmm. Right.
because there's too many people today. I call them jargonites. There are a lot of people that love to just use jargon and
Hmm.
use the same social mores that other people use. They hear somebody say something like this and they're like, okay, that's safe to say, so I'm just going to repeat it. It's like,
Okay.
no, 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 no. You're an individual. You have a mind. You have goals.
Right.
Who are you?
Hmm.
Who are you and what do you want?
Hmm.
How how hard is that for you to say? Why? And why? What do
Yeah.
you want?
Right.
Why can't you just tell me what you want? What's wrong with that? I'm asking you, what
Right.
do you want?
Yeah.
Right? Well, what's
So
wrong with that?
yeah, there's almost two parts to that. Like if you think about it, because they have to actually internalize it themselves and understand what they want, and then be able to verbalize it to you in a way that makes sense and is still realistic. It's like you can't say, "Well, I want six pack abs." It's
For
like,
sure.
well, that's great, but okay, how the fuck are you going to
Yeah,
get there?
let's walk
You
there.
know?
But that's my responsibility as a coach. If you
Yeah.
do want six pack abs, now
Yeah.
it's my responsibility as a coach to be like, all right, well, let's set the stage for that. Okay. Well, let's go from where we need to get there. Let's set the expectation, but let's also, so if we're going to get there, that's fine.
Hmm.
Let's put you in reality though of how long it's going to take, what you
Right.
need to do to get there, XYZ. Cool. And then let's give you a task for today.
Hmm.
This is how we're going to slowly start to get you. I know 6 months from now might seem like a while to get those six pack abs, but
Hmm.
let's get you on stage one or step one for today.
Hmm.
So that's great, right?
Hmm.
Um, what you're talking about is something I deduced a long time ago as well, in studying philosophy and kind of understanding how poor our education system is, because this is really where it starts.
Hmm.
The reason why people are so, what I like to call like nebulous, is
Hmm.
because our school systems are teaching people to be this way.
Right.
No one has the ability to stick a flag in the ground anymore and defend their post.
Right.
Say, this is my viewpoint. I shouldn't say no one, obviously, using those types of, there's very few people that do that
Right.
because all our school is run by women and everything's about self-esteem now and civil rights and all this stuff and no one's allowed to offend and no one's so what
Hmm.
we've done is we've cultivated our men into believing I'm not allowed to be aggressive, I'm not allowed to have these goals, I need to get out of the way for women and I need to get out of the way for multicolored people or whatever kind of multi-species they are or whatever they are today, right? And then these men are kind of pushed away and they're not allowed to have goals and they're not allowed to thrive and they're not allowed to be competent.
Right.
And then when I ask them what they want, because they've kind of been pushed to the side, it's like they're not allowed to want.
Hmm.
Then the next thing we have to discuss is this. Our school systems today, they teach people what to think, not how to think. So
Right.
the big thing, so when you start to like bastardize people that way,
Hmm.
it's almost like a Stockholm syndrome,
Right.
right? Where they're a prisoner of their own mind.
Hmm.
They're not allowed to be an individual anymore as far as that's concerned or have their own wants and desires as a human being. Then the next thing is now you go to a school system that teach you to become like a worker,
Hmm.
right? A laborer of sorts, of some way,
Right.
shape, or form. And what they do is they inundate you with all this information.
Hmm.
How much information can you take in?
Right.
All right, we're going to test you on it. Then we're going to dump all that information. All right, how much information can you take in? And there's no way for people to sit there and start conceptualizing things.
Hmm.
It's a way to like wash you to turn you into pretty much a computer system, right? That's tasked with just completing objectives,
Right.
right? It's not to say you as an individual or you as a human, what can you think or what thoughts can you come up with or how can you do this?
Hmm.
So what I call like categorizing of information, right? So we're just giving you a ton of information and then we're telling you how to spit it out. Whereas what I go down is I say, I want to teach people how to think.
Hmm.
And this is where like the base level of philosophy comes in. I know philosophy is such a boring topic to most people, but the reality is it's one of the greatest tools that we could have to really structuring a good society because what we need to start teaching people is how to order information, but we need to teach them essentially what like logic.
Right.
Okay. If we need to live in a society or a civilization, we need to be able to communicate with one another because we need to depend on one another, right?
Right.
Plain and simple.
Hmm.
If I can't take information and spit it out properly and communicate it, then therefore I cannot talk to other people. And that's what's kind of going on in today's world. I look at, unfortunately, Hunter, your generation of people, and
Yeah.
they're social retards.
Right.
And I use that term in the sense of what it means to be is they are retarded in the sense of
Right.
being socialized.
They're underdeveloped. Mm.
They're regressing.
Yeah.
They are retarding the system because now they're going back to this state of Cro-Magnon where it's like turning into a series of like grunts and noises and they can't vocalize things and say things. And
Yeah.
even like making eye contact or looking at you and saying something or even greeting or showing any type of facial expression towards you is considered weird
Right.
or cringe, right? Is that the parlance of
That's the yeah.
or ick, right? So where do we go with this? And this is what I'm discussing here essentially is we need to teach people how to take in information and then turn them into like premises, right? Premises to conclusions.
Hmm.
And this is essentially what a computer is. They use logic gates, right?
Okay.
This is what binary code does. And most people don't know this, and I'm going to get way too far into it, but they're going to take a code, and they want to create a conclusion. It's going to open a gate. So if then premises.
Hmm.
And that's what we want to start doing is we want to start teaching kids, and that's what we should be doing is teaching kids how to order information in their mind to come to conclusions.
Okay.
Wrapping that all back to where we were starting off at in the circle of trust, where what do I want? It's like people have a bunch of floating stuff in their head of what they want,
Hmm.
and they're not allowed to want. But then when they're asked to want, then they go into this state of,
Yeah. I have no idea.
because they have a whole bunch of information circling around their brain, plus the social mores of the time, plus blah, 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 blah. And they can't just sit there and say, well, what I want is this. I want this, and this is my conclusion.
Hmm.
Does it make sense?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I'm pushing people to do now is it's like start ordering your mind.
Right.
Start ordering what you're doing. What are you doing here? What are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish?
Hmm.
Right? And then be able to verbalize it succinctly and efficiently.
Right.
It's that simple.
Hmm.
The Spartans, they had this thing that they perfected. It was called I'm gonna mess it up. I'm gonna use it as like being laconic.
Okay.
Being laconic was a practice of the Spartan culture was to say as much as you can say in as few words as possible.
Okay.
Molin Labe, right? Or
Right.
Molin Labe, come and
Yeah. Come
take,
and take.
right? When presented with, hey, we're gonna take your weapons and all that stuff, come and
Right.
take, right? There was a famous one too. I think we have so many arrows that it's gonna blot out the sun. Well, then we'll fight in
Play
the
in the shade.
shade,
Right.
right? And it was like it was witty, but it was short, it was quippy, but it packed
Right.
a punch, right?
Yeah.
And it's like I think a lot of people are very scared to be that way,
Hmm.
where it's like, I'm going to say few things, but I'm going to imbue way more than that through
Right.
my behavior, through how I stand, through how I live, through my virtue, through that. And it all wraps up in that nice little bow of
Right.
just being direct.
Yeah. So going back to the education system, I think that even that ability has been lost because everything is so wrapped up in political correctness and trying to change. This is one of those things that just fucking wraps me around the axle. Replacing the word you with the
Uh-huh.
letter U. It's lazy and
I
it's
agree.
it's ridiculous.
I agree.
Okay, that's not a thing. It,
Right.
it is an actual word, not a letter.
Right.
Okay, but there's so much of in culture to try to reduce everything to these sort of simplifications,
Hmm.
right? That people have lost their ability to like really truly be articulate.
For sure.
You know.
Yeah. I was just thinking about that before I even came in here too. Because I hear so many young kids today cussing. And I get it. The problem with that is too, like modern culture is trying to tell kids to like really rebel against tradition and
Hmm.
rebel against the old ways. And being a rebel is being an activist, and being an activist is the highest value system you can be. And you should be a revolutionary in everything you do. And it's like, well, kid, smoking weed and listening to trap music is not revolutionary. You're just a
Right.
loser, right? Like the thing is, because you want to shirk responsibility and you want to shirk discipline does not make you a rebel. It makes you a loser.
Right.
And I think that's also something that needs to start being said. We need to start looking at people who are losers in society and being like, you people are losers,
Right.
right? There's a tier system. I hate to
Hmm.
say it, there's a hierarchy and everything.
Hmm.
We should go back to using shaming language to people and let them know like you're not making the cut,
Right.
you know? But going back to all that too, like with the YOU and the cussing thing, the big thing that I'm a believer of is like, hey, master something before you start taking shortcuts.
Right.
Yeah, I think cussing and swearing and on occasions can add impact and add
Hmm.
emphasis and can add value to a conversation. So I'm
Hmm.
not anti cussing whatsoever. But
Hmm.
if that's your first thing to resort to,
Right.
right? It's like master it first
Hmm.
and then you could start to add your flair to it, right?
Right.
Master the tradition first, master the basics.
Hmm.
It's kind of what happened to me with jujitsu. When I first started doing jujitsu, I got my purple belt pretty quickly. I got my purple belt within 3 years. And I was going to an academy that was a little bit more mom and poppy, right? A little bit like there wasn't a whole lot of competitors. It was more like, dads and stuff like that. And, being a bigger and dominant guy, I kind of got away with a lot more stuff and I could use my strength and I could be a little bit more dynamic and XYZ. And then I left that academy and I went to another academy,
Hmm.
a high level academy. I went to Alliance, like the HQ in San Diego under Johnny Faria. So I'm a newly promoted purple belt walking in there, and I'm going up against these kids that are blue belts, and like I'm struggling against some of these blue belts and
Yeah.
even like high level white belts. And I'm like, damn, like what the heck is going on? I'm a
Right.
purple belt. Like, come on, like 230 pounds. I'm athletic. I'm awesome. Blah 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 blah. Right? Got my purple belt in 3 years. And I quickly realized like the reason why these kids are so good is because they're dedicated to the fundamentals.
Right.
So I was showing up to these advanced classes and trying to compete with these advanced people, even depending on the levels. And I was like, you know what I've kind of been doing wrong the whole time is I've been trying to go to the advanced classes for everything. I
Hmm.
tried to advance past the basics.
Right.
I think I sat there. I'm like, okay, I got the basics. Okay, I know how to shrimp. I know how to do whatever. I can do that. I can do the triangle. I can do this. No over your naked choke. I know a cross choke. Blah 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 blah. I need to go to advanced now. I need to move on to advanced. It's like
You're not there yet.
so. At that point in time, I had to humble myself and I had to say, all right, as a purple belt, I'm
Right.
showing up to the fundamentals class.
Hmm.
I would show up to the fundamentals class every day. And the great part was Johnny was coaching the fundamentals class. And I got to sit there and I got to watch this guy who was like a master at jujitsu go through the fundamentals. And I would watch his body. I would just watch how he'd pivot and move himself. And I'd watch how he'd explain it. And he'd just do it so gracefully in a way. I hate to use it. Like
Yeah.
yeah, I think graceful is a good way to say it, but like he was just so crisp. Like his movement, his technique, everything he did. I'd just sit there and I'd watch how he moved and then I'd listen to his instructions subconsciously in a way. And it's like, oh,
Right.
that's what I was missing.
Hmm.
That's what I was missing. I needed to sit there and watch him do his fundamentals
Hmm.
and just stay there. And I literally, I think for even 3 years underneath him, I went to more fundamentals classes than I did at any other class.
Right.
And I learned a gigantic lesson there. And it was like, we have, especially in today's culture, again, Hunter, your generation, they want to take the elevator. They want to take the escalator on everything. And it's like, well, the stairs teaches you more.
Right.
You're not
Definitely.
you're not too good for the stairs.
Yeah.
And we have too many people that think they're too good for the stairs.
There are too many people that are being told that they're too good for the stairs.
Agreed.
So they're not even bothering,
I agree.
you know?
It's like, and that's the problem. We were talking even before this. I've been doing a lot of research on other philosophers that have kind of forecasted the direction that Western civilization was going to go. And they've even said in the past, a culture and society is only as good as their technology, right? And
Okay.
what they talk about is how technology actually comes in to ruin all great civilizations.
Okay.
And in my writings, this is what I've kind of understood is that there's actually three major relationships that are going on here, right? Three major relationships being humans, the earth, and technology.
Okay.
And when we start to tilt those relationships where they're not harmonious.
Hmm.
There's not an equilibrium. That's when we start to see a lot of bad things happening. Like, for instance, we're plundering the earth
Hmm.
for these technologies, and these technologies are superseding human beings beyond their learning capacity, and it keeps going, and then we keep plundering for more and all this other stuff, and it's like there's a reason why there's an issue. And then the next problem that we see as far as the culture is concerned, and this is what I'm seeing in a lot of people today, is a lot of parents want their kids to be better than them, which I think is a natural
Right.
progression. I think that is what evolution essentially is. As a parent's goal and role, they want to leave the earth better for their children, and they want their children to be in a better position
Right.
than they were. Sure. But sometimes we need to sit there and we need to take a look at what is truly progress.
Hmm.
And we also have to sit there and we have to take a look at, are we progressing beyond our culture? And what I mean by that is, are we progressing past the traditions which kept the nucleus intact,
Right.
right? And are these technologies are they necessary
Hmm.
for the growth of this culture to prosper?
Hmm.
And I look at it today and I say, no, they're
No,
not.
they're really not.
I think there's technologies out there, and that's why I kind of take a my stance is, hey, I've been saying this for years, but it's not going to happen because something's going to have to happen. But this is where I sit here and I say, hey, we need to sit here and like call a timeout,
Right.
and we need to say, all right, hey, let's stop and let's reassess, and let's take an assessment and say what's good
Hmm.
and what's bad,
Right.
right? And how can we maintain a culture, and how can we procure a culture,
Hmm.
add some bits of the technology in, but then everything else that's unnecessary, let's let it go by the wayside,
Right.
right? Because if it's not needed, we don't need it. And I think we're at a state in this world right now where needs are more important than wants.
Okay.
Now, let's go back to what I was discussing though, as far as like the progression of these children. What's going on with parents today is they're sitting there saying, "Oh, well, I'm just a dummy and my child is this prodigy. They were born in this time, they have computers, they have tablets, they have smartphones. It's going in this direction."
Hmm.
And that's where we've gone wrong as parents as well. To sit there and think that your kid is some child genius that is already better than you, when in fact they're 12 years old and they just have an attitude.
Right.
That's all it is, right?
Yeah.
They're not
Right.
better than you,
Yeah.
right? They're just using more modern technology. And I would even say that's actually a detriment to them,
Right.
because what you've done is you've put them in advanced classes at 12 years old. And now you've entitled them to believe that they're the greatest thing on earth, and they've never learned the fundamentals.
Hmm.
And it's like, okay, well, what's going to happen to them? So, for instance, one of the things that's very perplexing about me to most people is, um, I'm not a big fan of work.
That's funny.
And what I mean is, like, I'm not a big fan of, and this is one of my truest beliefs, and I've written about this extensively.
Uh-huh.
My big thing is that I'm creating a culture,
Right.
right? I'm recreating a culture, because I think what's wrong with American culture is that we were taught to work.
Hmm.
Right? Now, it's not to say that I'm against work ethic, and it's not to say that I'm against people working. But what I am against is essentially taking these kids, putting them through a school system, teaching them that an 8-hour workday is mandatory for the rest of your life, and then turning you into a factory worker or a corporate slave, or a, God forbid, even though I'm a fan of people being in the military,
Hmm.
a soldier on the line that is just meant to be cannon fodder, right?
Right.
Okay. So where am I going with this? I see a lot of people today that get through the school system. They do all their homework. They do all this stuff. They get good grades. They go to school. They go to a college, and then they do a follow-on degree to get their master's and PhD in order to do X, Y, Z. Okay, but what did they learn as their fundamentals along the way? They didn't learn how to think. We already
Right.
covered that one,
Right.
right? They were told what to think,
Hmm.
just so they can go and do those jobs,
Hmm.
right? Along the way, did they ever learn anything about nutrition? Did they learn ever how to meditate or talk to their emotions, or how to manage their emotions? No. So that's why we have so many people that are emotional children today that throw tantrums. Their nutrition's way off, so their gut health is bad. So now that also makes them more emotional and crazy and
Right.
unstable upstairs. This is why most people sit there and say, I have ADHD, I have all these things. It's like, no, no, no. you're eating junk. You're
Right.
eating junk all the time.
Mhm.
Oh, and then your cortisol levels are through the roof and blah, 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 blah. And then you don't get good sleep and you're sitting there staring at a screen all the time and blah, blah, blah. You're probably jerking off way too much, by the way, but whatever. We can get it later. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So you don't know how to think. You don't know how to fill your body back up with nutrition. You don't know how to take care of yourself emotionally either. Um, and the biggest one, do you know how to work out? You have this body.
Right.
Your body is, I mean, I hate to say it, your body is meant to work, right?
Yes, it
It's
is.
meant to face struggles. But what I would say too, though, is our body's meant to fight.
Hmm.
Women, a little bit different. Obviously, they're meant to bear children and all this other stuff. But
Hmm.
women are capable of fighting as well, right? They're
Right.
capable of defending themselves in situations. But we're also meant to labor and we're meant to work. But I don't think it's supposed to be, we're not supposed to be putting this much of an emphasis
Hmm.
on people laboring.
Right.
It's not supposed to be 8 hours a day for the rest of your life and
Hmm.
then you get to relax. I'm more of the notion of like you should be taking care of your body, you should be taking care of your mind, you should be taking care of your spirit, and then you should be working enough where you're putting yourself through some type of hardship, but then you're also making enough money to be able to survive and invest into your health and well-being
Hmm.
and the health and well-being of your family. And that's the direction that I want to bring it back to is you're a human being, you're here to grow, you're here to level up,
Right.
right? You're not just here to be a laborer who is now just a tax slave to your corporate and state overlords.
Hmm.
I would even go so far as to say the Federal Reserve and IMF and all those people. That's why fractional reserve banking exists, is for you to be an indebted slave from birth
Right.
and then continue to pay into the system. And it's meant now, and if you're not aware of this, of what's going on right now, the rug has been pulled from underneath you. You will own nothing. You will be happy and you will continue to work and you will continue to feed the system. And they will give you what they deem you benefit, which isn't going to be much,
Right.
but you're going to continue to labor for them for the rest of your life. It's like, is that really the existence that you want? And oh, by the way, what are you going to be eating? You're going to be eating GMO soy slop and crickets.
And crickets. Yeah.
You're going to be, you will take the vaccine and you will be happy. You will
Hmm.
take the vaccine. You will take the vaccine. You will continue to take more of these vaccines, right? You will sit there and be augmented into virtual reality and not live in this reality. You will live in a pod, right?
Hmm.
Like you will do those things. And it's like,
Right.
well, the true revolution is taking ownership of yourself and your body and your mind.
Right.
It's like I created a philosophy, the first book that I wrote, and what I said, there's six main components that people focus on the day to day that they don't realize that they're trying to strive for.
Hmm.
The physical, the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, the financial, and the relational. Those are the six key components of every person's life that they're trying to plus up in,
Hmm.
right? Now, the problem is our school system has taught you that you can only focus on three for you to be happy. And then what you need to do is you need to go out there and you need to find your other half. And then your other half might be able to come in and either add to those three or add to the other or the remaining three. So the problem that we have is we have this code of people going out there and searching for it and other people and other things and blah, blah, blah. And they can only focus on these three. They don't have time for the rest. So they're sacrificing all this other stuff. And it's like, well, what if we lived in a world where we taught people from very early on, you can focus on all six throughout your week if you
Hmm.
just periodize your life in the right way?
Okay.
Does it make sense?
It does.
So what I propose and what I'm trying to create in a future society is single family income,
Hmm.
one person making the income for the family. And even what I propose then too is we need to structure and use our technologies where, like we discussed earlier, we still have people that are doing things within our communities that
Hmm.
add value to other people's lives for their survival, because that's what brings the most value. But we're not slaving away at a 40-hour work week.
Hmm.
One of the biggest reasons why we've seen so many issues with men today too, as well, is what? Well, the 40-hour plus work week has stolen the father from the household. So
Right.
like the boomers, the reason why boomers have such a tough time is because they were not raised by fathers. They were raised by television.
Right.
They were raised by Leave It to Beaver. They were raised by
Hmm.
this American dream being broadcasted to them through the TV
Hmm.
because their father was going out to work trying to live in this new cosmopolitan life of Leave It to Beaver slash whatever was going on.
Hmm.
Does it make sense?
Oh, it does.
So boys never got to sit there and see what their father added to society, and he was missing. And he'd come home and then he'd pour a scotch and a bourbon and be pissed off because right? Now he's got these annoying kids that want more. They want more attention from him. And he's like sitting there saying, we got 2 cars in the driveway or a car in the driveway. We got a color TV. We got a house overhead. That's more than I ever had. You little freaking brat. And then all of a sudden,
Right.
slapping upside the head and all that other shit. And then more
Yeah.
alcohol and XYZ. It's like that's why the boomer generation fucked everything up in America because they were the first generation to do without seeing their fathers
Mhm.
working and
Right.
having those values bestowed upon them by
Mhm.
and seeing a direct reflection of what their father's value was to society or slash their community.
Mhm.
So my goal is to bring that back
Mhm.
where we will now start to see what people do, where fathers are able, boys are going to be able to, daughters are going to be able to see what their fathers do within the community because it's going to be right there within the community.
Mhm.
Long story with all that stuff, but
No, that's okay.
that's what I'm trying. That's what I'm really trying to build. And I think that most this going back to like what we discussed off camera,
Mhm.
this is what most people dream of is to
Right.
go back to I would say it's to go back to the American dream. That's where we have to really pivot and steer the ship back around.
Mhm.
Let's go back to the quote unquote American dream where we have a house that's affordable or in my opinion, given to you,
Mhm.
where we can have the family because the family is the nucleus of the culture.
Right.
It's the reason why we call it the nuclear family. We
Mhm.
have to have that. It needs to be a single income as well because the mother needs to be a mother
Mhm.
and the father needs to be the provider and the protector. The bad part is we have created a culture today where the father is absent, even though he's there being the provider.
Mhm.
And he's absent in the sense of he's not providing guidance and mentorship and he's overworked and he's overstressed and he's over leveraged. And it's like, okay, well, what can we do to reduce the stress and reduce the leverage? Well, okay. Well, if we make things affordable, we make things more community organized as far as like people taking care of one another. We have the jobs that are local, right? And then we have jobs that actually have impact.
Mhm.
Like I told you beforehand, um, why not have our trades come back? Why not have men that are doing things that are directly impacting the community, like butchers, like someone raising the animals, right?
Mhm.
And everybody has a turn to do XYZ
Mhm.
or growing the crops for the animals and greenhouses and all this other stuff. We don't have to have fields and all this stuff. We can do multi-tiered greenhouses to have different types of things. Then people can come in and sort and do XYZ and why can't we develop this? Why can't we use modern day technology with aquaponics, hydroponics, solar, greenhouse technology?
Mhm.
Like I said, hydro turbines, small hydro turbines, right? Where we
Mhm.
have a free flowing system that's closed loop within the community that's generating electricity.
Right.
All of this is easy, simple engineering stuff that we could do, we could build,
Mhm.
right? I actually think I saw there's a community that's doing something pretty close to this in Dubai. It's a little bit still a little bit too like modernized in the sense of like it's a hey, you still got to go outside and you got to go to work,
Mhm.
like townhouses, apartment complexes, but they're recycling their water. They have people that are doing that. They have people that are like, who the gardener is, right? We're not just importing it from the third world and saying, hey, here's 1250 or whatever and blah blah blah. It's like,
Mhm.
no, no, no. These are people that are part of the community and they all add value to it.
Right.
So I think that's the sense that we need to get back to. I think that's another sense. And if I want to talk about the immigration aspect of it right now too, we have more than enough people in America.
Right.
We don't need we don't we don't need more people coming in.
Right.
What we need to do is we need to clean up our mess at home. We need to trim the fat.
Right.
We need to tell people to get off their ass and listen, I'm not telling you to work like I said, I'm not telling you you need to work 40 hours a week. I'm
Mhm.
not telling you you need to be a wagey. I'm not telling you as a matter of fact, one of the biggest things that I propose is this 15% fair tax.
Okay.
15% fair tax. That would accomplish so many things,
Mhm.
right? If I make $200,000 a year and I decide to buy a Mercedes Benz, that's $80,000, and I add 15% to that, I've now just contributed because I'm rich or more wealthy. Now
Mhm.
just contributed more to society. So
Mhm.
whatever I purchase, I pay 15% tax on, and that goes to the government, and that's all the government gets.
Right.
That's all they get to operate on. Whatever we accumulate, that's you better budget. You better figure shit out. You better go back to being, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And if people want to boycott the government that way by not buying things, so fucking be it. That's the
Right.
right of the people,
Yeah.
right? But then you also have people that are a little bit lower income and they're going to go buy Ford Escorts.
Right.
And they're going to buy that for $8,000 and they're going to be a 15% on top of that. And that's how you learn to budget. And that's how you learn to live within your means. And
Hmm.
the cool part is if you're low income or you want to buy that stuff and you want to start saving your money up to become higher in a bracket,
Hmm.
we're not going to have tax brackets clearly, but we will have brackets as far as your
Yeah, just what
financial
you're capable
status.
of. Yeah.
But at least you would be able to understand that I could climb the ladder based on my choices and decisions.
Hmm.
And I think that's what's supposed to happen. I
Right.
think we're supposed to live in a system where people are able to climb and fall based on their own choices, based on their own, dare I say the word, merit. Whereas
Right.
today it's a clown show.
Mhm.
You know, George Carlin says it best. It's a big club and you ain't in it. They pulled the ladder completely up and they've
Right.
now said you are not in this club. We have closed the doors of the club.
Hmm.
We are now creating it. So we're going to extract everything that you have through endless forms of taxation and red tape and blah, blah,
Hmm.
blah, blah, blah. We're going to steal all your resources. We're going to make it so that you can never climb this ladder because it's been pulled up.
Right.
And guess what? So fucking be it. And
Yeah.
I'm going to sit here and I'm going to tell you, as someone who's served my country and fought overseas and has had to battle things that you could probably never fathom, I don't fucking like the game being rigged.
Right.
I don't like it. I didn't fight for that. I
Hmm.
fought for something completely different. And to be quite honest, I'm fucking pissed.
Hmm.
I don't believe someone like me or any other man who has strived and achieved the feats that I have gone through
Hmm.
should have to sit there and live in squalor and live under this type of fucking bullshit. And that's what I want to give to people, right? I want to give the ability for people to go back to live in a meritocracy where you climb a ladder based on your merits, the type of man you are, the type of virtues that you live by,
Hmm.
the way you take care of yourself, the way that you take care of your family, the way that you take care of your community. You should be elevated.
Hmm.
You should be elevated to a higher status just by being that individual. And the problem that we see today is that if you are that person, you are now squashed down to the bottom and you're now at a lower rank level because you decided not to cut off your pee or fucking dye your hair purple and go under the fucking pronouns of they, them,
Right.
or dare I say, and this may be a controversial take, dare I say, belong to a club where they tell you you got to diddle kids so they could blackmail you so that you could climb their fucking ladder. I don't think those types of people
Hmm.
should be in any type of power or authority. And as a matter of
No.
fact, I think those types of people should face some consequences that are far greater than anything they've ever faced in their life today.
Right.
But that's just me speaking.
I completely agree. Uh,
I agree.
yeah.
We don't
Yeah.
know what they are, but
Right.
we do know that they're in the physical form in this reality, and that physical form can be taken away.
There you go.
So,
So I kind of wanted to circle back a little bit to something that you said earlier. Because you brought up the Leave It to Beaver kind of era,
mhm,
right? And in that sort of sense of television. And I wrote just a small article on this like years ago about the idea that people have conceptualized this idea that family structure and their families as a whole are supposed to be perfect
right,
because that's what was being fed to them
for sure.
for generations, this is a perfect family. This is how everything is supposed to operate. Everybody gets along. There's always a happy outcome. It's like that isn't reality.
No.
We're human beings. We have conflicts and we work through those things. We don't stop being family, but we have to be able to like deal with those things as they happen, right?
So this is the next thing that I want to discuss because for if you've researched me, and for those of you, if any of you guys do choose to research me outside, you're going to see that I'm kind of a bit of a controversial figure.
Hmm.
I've talked about some very controversial things, most importantly, social sexual dynamics. I've talked about for probably the last 5 years, and I kind of taken a pause on that because I beat the dead horse, and there's other people out there that are
Right.
talking about it more than me, and there's no need for me to repeat that stuff. So essentially what it comes down to, and the reason why I've created my philosophy of those 6 things as well, is, believe it or not, the thing that I talk about with my philosophy is it's a pyramid,
Hmm.
and it goes from easiest to hardest. So the physical, the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, the financial, and the relational. And when I discuss this, I talk about relationships. Relationships are the hardest thing in the world.
Hmm.
Relationships are the hardest thing in the world. And this is something that needs to be spoken about at length, right?
Right.
Especially to kids, right? Going into that. So just to kind of solidify the philosophy, those first five that I talked about, the physical, the mental, emotional, and spiritual, those first four at least, can completely be controlled by you and you alone. You
Mhm.
could sit in a room and you could control all of those things.
Mhm.
The financials a little bit harder. Obviously, you're going to have to create some relationships, but you could, with a computer, you could build your finances on
Mhm.
your own. The relationships. That's the only one in that pyramid that makes it outside of yourself,
Mhm.
if we're being honest.
Right.
And as you know, as being a parent and being in relationships and so on, how easy is it to control another human being?
It's not.
It's right.
You know?
It's the hardest thing.
Right.
It is the hardest thing because, frankly, you don't have any control,
Mhm.
right? You can nudge,
You can definitely influence and try to,
influence,
like,
nudge.
have
Exactly.
that
Yep.
that sort of rapport or whatever that might be with the other person, but you have to develop that over time, and it has to be there.
And it's
If you
dynamic.
Yeah.
And like you just said, so let me get into the social sexual dynamics of things too. One of the biggest issues that we have right now in
Mhm.
our country is that we now have the state that has come in to become the father slash husband in every relationship.
Right.
You essentially, and I hate to say that, me as well, but we are cucks. We are all
True.
cucked. We are all cucked by the state. The state
Mhm.
at any point can come into your household and they could point guns at you and they could put you in a cage or they could remove your life.
Yes.
And the biggest thing is when it comes to these social sexual dynamics is that all it takes for your all it takes is for your spouse to do now or your significant other that lives with you is to call the cops
Mhm.
and say he's bad. He's done XYZ.
Mhm.
He's done DV. He's done SA. Do you notice how all of those things now have abbreviations and they're like these big things? I've been trafficked. That's the new one. That's the new, you know, it used to be domestic violence 10 years ago. Then it
Right.
became SA, sexual assault within the last 5 years. And now it's human trafficking. I've been human trafficked. I don't know if the last 2 years, that's the big thing.
Mhm.
Okay. But if you notice, these are all the big things that get promoted, right? This is put into the parlance of the culture of
Mhm.
this is the new boogeyman. And
Mhm.
it's all a weapon that women get to use against men. And I can't tell you, I mean, I can tell you actually, I've been with lots of women in my life, and I can assuredly tell you that 80% to 90% of women that I've been with have all had some type of boogeyman story in the
Mhm.
world of DVSA
Right.
human. And the reality is those numbers don't fucking add up.
Mhm.
If I'm being honest with you, those numbers don't add up.
Okay.
Okay. And the reason why I'm even bringing all this stuff up is because what's really going on is this system has been weaponized against men to keep them down.
Mhm.
We don't have the power in the culture today. And all it takes is an accusation or just the continuation of this diatribe, this word, this jargon
Mhm.
of saying, "Oh yeah, men are assaulters, men are predators." I've
Right.
been I've been I've had domestic violence done to me. I've had SA done to me. All it takes is a girl to just say those things to
Mhm.
keep things down, right? Men down. Where am I going with this and why am I bringing this up? I think that the state has no role in any man's relationship with a woman, with his when a man gets married to a woman,
Mhm.
what is being said is you are in charge of that household.
Okay.
You're in charge.
Mhm.
You are the king of this castle. This is what I bestow upon you as the leader of the civilization.
Mhm.
Let's say as a king, because I have to understand my kingly role. I have to bestow some kingship to my citizens as well to let them understand the archetype. Now, what does it mean as a king or an
Mhm.
emperor? It means that I have to play a role of someone who has to understand I can't become too tyrannical or else I'm going to be killed. I can't be too weak or else I'm not going to be respected. I can't take too many things away, but I also have to give as well,
Mhm.
right? I can't let you think that you're a king, but I also have to give you an understanding that you need to, in your environment, understand what the roles are like
Mhm.
because heavy is the head that wears the crown. Does it make
Right.
sense?
Mhm.
And every man should have the ability to be able to play in that environment.
Mhm.
Does it make sense?
Right.
So, one of the big issues that I see in today's world is that there's far too many he said, she said getting put into our legal system. And notice I don't use the word justice system, I use the word legal system.
Mhm.
Because the fact is, judges and lawyers are making a shit ton of fucking money off
Mhm.
of these he said, she said legalities.
Mhm.
They're making all the money. I don't know if you know this. I saw something that was pretty. darn infuriating.
Hmm.
And I found that I think it's a half of every half of the money that every judge ascribes for child support from a man goes into their pension.
Really, that's a phenomenal amount of money then.
Correct. So you're telling me that this judge is incentivized
Hmm.
to take and extract a man's earnings and wealth to secure their own retirement? Is that justice?
No, not at all.
Okay. Now let's think of all the lawyer fees that are incorporated into all that too.
Hmm.
So now these lawyers that charge exuberant amounts of money, they're extracting that from you as well. And they're saying, "Oh, we're going to put you through this process to determine the proper outcome." It's like, well, how about we just let the man run his own household?
Hmm.
And if something egregious is going on, we should have a community of other men that will take care of their own,
Right,
right? Because I'm not sitting here saying men should be abusers. I'm not
right.
I'm not touting that. But what I am saying is we should allow men to make the judgment calls within their own households.
Hmm.
And if the community decides that what he's doing is too far, or he's being abusive, or he's not being a good father,
Hmm.
then we should have other men within our community that step up and
Right.
have some words,
Hmm.
right? And I think that's more important than what we have going on today.
Right. There was a time in history when we were in small enough societies that that is how things worked.
Mhm.
There was a community of people and they understood everything has to have a certain sort of balance to it.
Right,
You can't have people that are taking more than everybody else because they feel it's their right or that they've contributed more and leave the rest with that. That's not how it works.
right,
And it's up to that group or that's community as a whole to decide this is what's okay and this is what's not. And if you get too far out of bounds, you are no longer part of this community.
right,
You go that way or you die.
right.
You know,
Or there's going to be some warnings,
yeah,
or there's going to be some, it's kind of how we operate. We like to kind of operate on the three strike rule. The first thing is
hmm,
going to be like, hey, motherfucker, don't let this shit happen again. We
right,
see what's going on. If it's not too far, if it hasn't gone too far.
hmm,
Next one is going to be, there's going to be some reinforcement into, hey, don't do this again if
hmm,
it wasn't too far. And then the third is like, you're out.
right,
It's usually how we operate.
hmm,
Men have a sense of justice,
right,
right? And I think that is more along the lines of justice.
hmm,
The next thing I will say is that, Lifetime movies have done a really good job of portraying men as abusers in a high rate. And it's kind of funny because lesbian relationships have higher forms of domestic violence than a male female relationship.
okay,
And if you were actually to calculate who the abuser is in the majority of male female relationships, it's actually 52% men, 48% women. So we're practically both just as violent.
hmm,
And I would even argue there's probably more of a propensity for women to be more physically violent than men. So that's probably underreported because there is an idea and notion that because women are smaller,
right,
they can hit. And then there's another thing where men are probably more embarrassed to admit that they've been abused or getting hit. So
right,
if we're sitting at an actual study that said 52-48, I would actually say it probably tilts a little bit further in the females being abusive than the men, right? So that's to be said. And what I mean by that is men aren't just freely going around raping and hurting women. We do, especially, and that's what I'm trying to create is a culture of virtuous men. That's what my
hmm,
school system would produce. So
hmm,
that's also something that we don't really have. It's not to say that we don't have to worry about. Sure, we should always keep our eye on some
right,
extremes in the periphery, but for the most part, we're going to be locked into this right and left lateral bounds,
hmm,
right? Because we produce good men,
hmm,
right? They've already gone through the military, they've learned virtue, they've already gone through this. They're not marrying until they're 30 years old, so they've kind of gotten the wild side out. The
right,
last year of them being in the military is going to be going into the Mister thing that I was telling you about, where hey, we're getting your finances all taken care of. We're getting your mental stuff taken care of. We're putting you through PT to make sure your body's all good. We're making sure that you're spiritually aligned as well, right? Of what you did and
hmm,
XYZ. And then we're getting you a job on the way out. So, and then also not to mention you're going to have a house for you to raise a family. So things should be pretty good in the household, right? And
hmm,
men should be pretty well off as far as that's concerned. So that's kind of what I talk about as far as that's concerned. Men aren't nearly as big of abusers. We're actually more we're actually more protectors towards women than we are abusers and wanting
Mhm.
to take.
Right.
The next thing is, and this is something that you discussed that I want to have a chat about, is that balance.
Mhm.
And what's gone on within our society today is we've given men all the responsibility without any of the accountability.
Mhm.
Does it make sense? Or authority, rather, not accountability. We've given men all the responsibility without any of the authority. We've taken men's authority completely away, and we've then burdened them with 100% of the responsibility. So
Mhm.
it's like we are 100% responsible for all of our actions, for everything we do, everything we say, everything we wear, everything we do, blah, 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 XYZ, right? How we treat everybody else.
Mhm.
But then we also have no authority to enact any of that reciprocated respect upon ourselves, because if we do that, then we're racists, or we're sexist, or we're some type of ist or phobe, or blah 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 blah. And it's like,
Right.
well, when you kind of tilt those scales in those directions,
Mhm.
you're only creating people that are going to become very, very disgruntled.
Mhm.
And we're starting to see that even in the youth today. Men like you and I right now, we're a little bit more like, we're just going to keep going, we'll keep doing it, I'll just work hard, blah 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 blah. I don't really feel like going to be the first one to throw the punches and all that other stuff.
Mhm.
We'll pick up if we need to, XYZ. Do you have a young generation of men that are full of testosterone, that aren't getting women, that are in student debt, that have no prospect of jobs,
Right.
only see the inflation going higher and higher and higher? And those types of guys, when being told that you're not going to have any authority over your life, and then you have to burden all the responsibility, those types of men, I believe, are going to be the ones that are going to be like, well, the game is rigged.
Mhm.
We don't like this.
Mhm.
Let's raise hell.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
that's the kind of balance that you have to take. And that's what I sit here and I look at as someone who, let's go over archetypes now, for instance, right? So there's a really good book out there that people should read. And I think this is something that really goes into the mythology of us as human beings,
Mhm.
especially as men, right? So the male mythology kind of goes through four different archetypes that Jung would describe. It's the king, the warrior, the magician, and the lover.
Right.
Okay. What I say is, understanding these archetypes from a leader perspective, is that what we need to do for our men is we need to put them through those archetypes throughout their life.
Okay.
But there's specific stages by which they have to accomplish it. It's just like for a woman, why is it so important that a woman be a wife and a mother in her first phase of adulthood? Well, that's when she's the most fertile. That's when she's the most able to do that,
Right.
right? As time progresses, it's going to get worse and worse and harder for her,
Mhm.
right? It doesn't mean she's not going to progress to become a woman after that, but those are the first thing, because time prescribes at that point,
Right.
this is when it needs to be,
Mhm.
plain and simple.
Yeah.
For men, at 18, it's you need to go and become a warrior. You need to test yourself in the initiation of warriorhood, for then you to progress into the next other
Mhm.
areas of your archetypes, right?
Mhm.
I bring that up because that's another thing that we've done wrong in our society today. And that's where the balance comes in with what we're discussing, is we are not giving men the ability to live out their archetypes. So just like what I discussed, as far as like men becoming the king of their castle,
Mhm.
that's something that needs to be bestowed upon them after they've gone through their journey of, they need to be able to dabble in. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be the king, but you need to
Yeah.
be able to dabble and have that as a part of your evolution and your archetypal journey,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
And then usually what happens is, it's funny because, India had such a good caste system for such a long time.
Mhm.
And what they'd find out is, the way that a man and a male peaks,
Mhm.
they go through it. They go through being the boy, then they become the man, and that's when they're supposed to be the leader of the family and take the name and all that other stuff. And
Mhm.
then they're supposed to descend into the sage.
Right.
So the father is supposed to know when to pass the torch to the son and say, "You are now the man of the household of the
Mhm.
family name, and I'm going to descend into my twilight of becoming the sage, of the old wise man, of the white hair." Right.
Right.
And that's why we used to have such a high regard for sages in the past, of our elders, because what our elders did is they passed the torch at the right time. They
Mhm.
understood the pendulum and the motion and the swing and the balance of things,
Mhm.
right? They were graceful in the sense of understanding how this cycle is supposed to move, and when their time and when their season approached,
Right.
and take the responsibility to be man enough to say, I'm no longer this, I'm moving into the next stage and the next element, right? So that would be the magician, right? or the lover or something like that along those lines,
Mhm.
right? So, um, these are all things that I've deeply contemplated for years and years and years, and saying like these are what's missing, and this is why people are so angry, and this is why people are so depressed. This is why people lack spirituality in today's world, because
Mhm.
where have we ever discussed any of this stuff in a child's upbringing?
Yeah, most of it is lost. It's dependent on the family, and if they're not discussing it, then they're not getting it anywhere
Well,
else.
I mean, the next thing is they're inundated with weed, inundated with alcohol. They got sports ball on TV and TV dramas.
Right.
It's like there is no such thing as a parent anymore.
Mhm.
You just have somebody who's there paying for you to live for a little while, for you to experience materialism.
Mhm.
It's like there's nothing deeper than the material world in today's society and our culture, and that's what I hate. There's no
Mhm.
substance. Everything's a shallow vessel.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's really, at the end of the day, that's what I push back against.
Mhm. So one of the things that like Hunter and I have discussed a lot at just recently is the whole concept that we have. It's really important that you find a sense of purpose, that you find something that makes you feel like you have a place in the world, or that you're contributing to the world, or something to that
Hmm.
effect, right?
Hmm.
That you have something that is giving you a sense of fulfillment
Sure.
in life.
Sure.
Because without that, you're just kind of going through the motions of like you're getting up, you're going to work, you come home, watch a little TV, and you go to bed.
Right.
Without that, you're just kind of you're just floating along and not really engaging and being a part of life.
I agree with you. But I'm going to push back on that really quickly.
Okay.
I had an epiphany. It's funny that we're having this conversation because I had this epiphany yesterday.
Hmm.
I think this obsession with finding one's purpose is just as kind of, I hate to say materialistic, but I think it's just as escalator elevator as what we were discussing earlier, right?
Okay.
It's like, I've sat here and I've tried to go, I've done tremendous amounts of like spiritual journeying and all this other stuff. And that's one thing I go into the spirit world talking to, of like, hey, what's my purpose? Hey, what am I supposed to be doing next? Hey, what am I? And it's almost like, well, I never get the answer. And it's like, shit, like you're supposed to give me my purpose.
Right.
It's like, okay, well then what do I do when I come home? It's like, okay, well, every single morning I get back up, I make my bed, I clean my room, I clean my environment. I have these non-negotiables in my life of, I have to eat this certain way, I don't drink alcohol, I meditate every single day, I do XYZ, right? I live according to my word, I live according to my values. It's like, isn't that good enough of a fucking purpose?
Right.
And why can't that be your purpose? Why can't it be your purpose to wake up every single day and live your life according to the model by which you value life?
Hmm.
Does it make sense?
It does.
I had a friend that I was discussing with yesterday. He's like, I talked to God, very religious man now.
Hmm.
He's like, I talked to God, and God said that I need to be a servant. And I said, we're all servants.
Okay.
I said, we're all already servants.
Hmm.
Why do you need to go and become a servant? He's like, well, I just feel like I need to give more to people. And it's like, bro, you're probably one of the best fathers I've seen. You're probably one of the best husbands I've seen.
Hmm.
You're one of the better men that I talk to, in the sense of like living life to the fullest, as far as like there's enough struggle involved there. He puts himself through hardships, but he lives a disciplined life, but then also lets go and does other things, XYZ, right?
Hmm.
It's like, why do you feel you need to give freely to people?
Okay.
Why do you feel you need to give freely to people? You're already giving.
Hmm.
You're giving to your family, right? You're giving to your community by living life as a role model like this. Why do you feel you need to walk up to somebody else who's less privileged than you and give him things? It's like, maybe your servitude should be in the sense of saying, hey, live life like me,
Hmm.
right? What's wrong with that? Now, the reason why I say this is because I think if you live your life that way,
Hmm.
I think that your purpose will show itself. And the next thing too is this: we say, I, I, I think I need to find my purpose. Well, there's going to be many purposes for you at different times of your life.
Hmm.
Does it make sense?
Yeah.
So there's no one purpose.
Hmm.
It's like, okay, walk on your journey, take the adventure to become a better man, and your purpose will show itself to you,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
And the reason why I mention that is because I think there's too many people that'll sit there in a chair and sit there paralyzed and be like, I'm going to journal, I'm going to meditate, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. Well, you're just fucking sitting.
Right.
Oh, I'm trying to find my purpose. I'm trying to find my purpose. I want to live my purpose. Yeah, we all fucking do.
Hmm.
We all do.
Right.
You've knocked on the door, right? You've knocked on the door, you've talked to God or the other dimension or whatever, and you said, I want to find my purpose.
Hmm.
Did the door open?
It's a good question.
Did the door open?
Yeah.
No, right?
Hmm.
Okay, that's your answer. Fucking get up out of your chair,
Right.
go lift some fucking weights, right? Go on a run,
Hmm.
meditate in a sense of like, hey, I'm just doing this to take care of myself, take care of yourself, clean your room, clean your environment,
Hmm.
take care of the community around you, right? Clean up some shit outside your house. Guarantee you in a week or two or less or something, something's going to pop up that's going to show you to go down this road. But too many people will just sit there stubbornly. And I've done the reason why I'm saying this is because I've learned these lessons by doing these things, right?
Hmm.
I call this masturbation. You don't have to just masturbate by being sexual. You can mentally masturbate as well.
Hmm.
And you could get stuck repeatedly mentally masturbating. It's like looking at Instagram. One of the reasons why I stopped looking at Instagram a long time ago was I saw all this motivation porn or all this hustle porn and all this stuff. I'm like, yeah, it's great. And it's like, I'm sitting here watching. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go hustle. And then it's like, okay, but what did I do?
Yeah.
So that one was quick, but I saw it more in other people where they're like,
Hmm.
yeah, I'm going to sit there and I'm going to watch all this motivational stuff. And it's like, bro, what have you accomplished today? What have you accomplished? It's like, oh, well, I was motivated. And it's like, but what did you do?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What have you
Hmm.
done? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? It's like a lot of us, and this is where it comes down to with this discipline thing again. A lot of us are really scared of taking care of the simple shit.
Hmm.
The simple shit's the hardest stuff in the world too. Like I had to really change this perspective in my mind a long time ago, where it was like doing the dishes or something like that, or taking the shopping cart back. It's like those little things that are like annoying are the hardest things to overcome. So I committed to doing those things and making
Hmm.
sure I do them right away. Because in my mind, like even cleaning my house, like just dusting and vacuuming and stuff, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so tired. I'm so sore. I just did it, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, this is going to take hours and it's going to take so much energy. And then I start doing it. It took 30 minutes and I feel great. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Hmm.
It's the same thing with making your bed and all this stuff. So, what I think, and if I'm going to really go to the fullest extent
Hmm.
of what a purpose of a man should be, it should be to become the most virtuous man possible, right? Now, it doesn't mean become the most moral, it means become the most virtuous.
Hmm.
And this is why I think virtue is more important than morality or ethics because virtue is something that is always ever expanding. It's a means of mastery, right? So that's really what we are trying to do as men is we're trying to become masterful. That's our true purpose is to become masters of ourselves and our environment.
Hmm.
And the way we can do that is by practicing virtue. Okay. So what does virtue look like? Have I talked about this with you
I don't
before?
think so.
All right. What is the virtue of courage?
Virtue of courage.
Yep.
Um, that's a very good question.
Right. It's very hard to define.
Yeah.
And these are the questions that need to be asked, and this is what males, mentors, men that are our guides in our world and in our
Hmm.
environment should be talking about.
Right.
Because if that's an important virtue to becoming a man, but you can't even sit here and tell me what the virtue of courage is, and I'm not trying to knock you.
Right.
It's just that this has not been a discussion,
Hmm.
and these are the things that need to be discussed
Right.
because courage is necessary.
Hmm.
Right? If we are going to ensure the safety and security of our culture and community,
Hmm.
there needs to be times in life. Let me give you this case and then we'll get back to this.
Hmm.
So courage is, being a Marine, when you get promoted to sergeant, you start getting fitness reports, right?
Hmm.
And they have these things on there, these virtues, but they call them leadership principles in the Marine Corps, where you get graded on, right?
Hmm.
And I had one warrant officer that was doing my fitness report, and he's like, I don't give a rating for courage for you guys because courage is only seen in war, and we're not a war fighting MOS. So this was before I lat moved.
Right.
we're not a war fighting MOS, so I can't rate you on courage. And it's like, incorrect. The second he said this sat so deeply, and this started my path
Hmm.
down this road because it was like, wait a second. I literally just got handcuffed the other day by PMO because I confronted a corporal and a lance corporal for doing some crazy, stupid shit, right? And I
Hmm.
walked up to them and I corrected this egregious behavior that was going on,
Hmm.
and it got physical, and I got handcuffed for it. And then they let me go, and everything was fine because that's how Marines should handle business. But it's like, wait a second, nobody else walked up and corrected this thing that was going on,
Right.
but I practiced some form of courage
Hmm.
by going and confronting the situation and putting myself in that way and harm's way by getting physical and blah 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 blah. It's like, how can you sit there and tell your sergeant that they're not courageous by doing that? The
Hmm.
next thing is, how is someone not courageous by going up to someone telling them that they're wrong or correcting someone's poor behavior in public
Hmm.
or XYZ? How's that not courage?
Hmm.
Right?
Right.
Now, hear me out. I can also sit there and argue that I wasn't courageous or XYZ in that moment, but I would say that there was more courage imbued than there wasn't. And this is what we need to start getting back into when we talk about courage and virtue is we need to start conditioning our men to understand these things and how to act. Now, what I will say about virtue, and then we'll go into courage. Virtue is doing the right thing at the right time for the right reasons with the right tools. You want me
Okay.
to repeat that?
Absolutely.
Doing the right thing at the right time for the right reasons with the right tools.
Okay.
Okay. We have a country that is starting to build up an army to invade our country because they have stated that they don't like our principles and they're coming to invade our country.
Hmm.
Would it be virtuous then for us to start to prepare to attack this country because they have declared that they are going to come and attack our country?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. So that's virtuous, right? So doing the right thing in that moment at that time.
Hmm.
Okay. Now, if I were to sit there and I were to say, well, in order to prevent them coming to our homeland to kill my people, what we're going to do is we are going to release a biological agent that turns them into fucking zombies.
Okay.
Would that be virtuous?
Probably not.
Probably not, right? And so this is what I'm saying is like you can do the right thing for the right reasons at the right time, but if you don't do it with the right tools,
Right.
then what has now happened to your virtue?
You've lost all sense of that.
Exactly, right? So virtue is a very, very delicate thing.
Hmm.
Okay. Now, let's get back to the virtue of courage, discussing this. What is courage? I could give you a classic case of it, but the way that we need to go, and this is what we need to allow people to do, is be able to play with these parameters because that's what we have to do is we have to give people parameters. So where we've gone wrong. Aristotle would argue that virtue or the virtue of courage would be so virtue for him is the mean between two vices. So it's the center point between two vices. And what is a vice? So the vices of courage would be cowardice on one end
Hmm.
and being overly brazen on the other,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
Okay. So we can understand this, right? The coward would never raise a fist or do anything, but the overly brazen would charge 4 machine gun nests on the top of a hill when he only has 10 people,
Right.
right? It's like he's being courageous for sure, but he's also being insanely stupid and doing more harm to others
Right.
than the objective would be.
Hmm.
So then what would be courageous in that sense would be, hey, let's retreat.
Hmm.
We've got an OP. We know what's going on here. Let's go get more freaking ammo or
Right.
whatever, or men or whatever, XYZ, or maybe let's go get some artillery to fire on that. And then we
Hmm.
could charge it. Does it make
Right.
sense?
Right.
That's courageous. Would you
Hmm.
not say?
Yeah.
But being overly brazen causes more harm than good.
Hmm.
So this is what we have to start to have our discussion about.
Hmm.
It's like, where are you being courageous and are you being virtuous in your courage? Are you doing it at the right place at the right time for the right reasons with the right tools?
Hmm. Right.
So now what I'm saying to you is instead, morality says you shall not kill.
Right.
Well, originally it started off with thou shalt not murder.
Exactly.
Okay. Where are your lateral limits on that? And now we go down this really crazy legal system of what
Hmm.
we've created today of what is murder and what's not. Now we have manslaughter charges. Now we have premeditated murder. Now we have all this stuff. It's like, no, 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 no. We should have just looked at the virtue of what's going on here. We should take a look at What happened? What was the place? What was the time? What was the intention? What were the tools
Hmm.
to decide whether or not this person is guilty of XYZ?
Right.
Or, and this is what I'm saying is we need to start giving men the ability to operate within these narrow limits rather than saying, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that, or else you're going to be put in a cage or you're going to
Hmm.
be exiled or XYZ. Do you see
Hmm.
where I'm going with this?
Right.
And it's a complete reshaping of the mind because
Hmm.
now what we're saying is we're giving you the authority
Hmm.
to have responsibility over your life and other people's lives, and you need to be responsible with that.
Right.
Whereas the other version is saying you're not responsible.
Hmm.
You need to have these rules put on you, and if you break these rules, we're going to punish you. And oh, by the way, we're also going to create new rules that are going to prevent you from being able to break that rule over there. Right?
Right.
Let's get into firearms, for instance.
Hmm.
It's like the rule was, hey, you're allowed to have firearms, just don't murder people.
Yeah.
Okay. Now it's, oh, in order for us to prevent you from possibly murdering people, we're now going to do a 10-day waiting period. You can't have this gun with this type of whatever in it. You can't have this magazine. You can't have this type of trigger. You have to register this. You have to go through this. You have to, it's like, no, 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 no,
Right.
no. You should have the authority and the responsibility to be able to take this tool and do what you will with it. And if you break this rule,
Hmm.
you are going to face some serious consequences,
Right.
depending on the place, the time, the reason, and the tool. Does it
Hmm.
make sense?
Yeah. Makes perfect sense.
I think so too.
You know, I mean, you could take that even to a simpler level and saying, okay, you're being given the ability and the responsibility to drive a car. You're driving something that can kill you and kill other people. Okay,
Way
it's
more readily than
your
a firearm for sure.
yeah.
But
You're you're responsible for making sure that you know how to do this safely
mhm,
and that you do it in a consistent manner where you're not harming anybody else
for
and you're
sure,
not causing harm to
for
yourself.
sure,
Okay. And it's again, this comes back to responsibility. It's like you have to be responsible for this. And if you can't do that, you no longer have that right or that privilege.
I agree.
Same
Agreed.
idea. But you can't kind of to your point, it's like you're not going to design the entire road system with fucking guardrails that only allow you to drive in this specific manner, in this specific speed, you know, otherwise the vehicle is just going to stop, or you're
You want to
just,
know what? You want to know a
you
case in
know,
point that's happening right now? They're putting speed bumps down in residential areas.
mhm,
It's like, why the fuck are we doing this?
right,
Right? I get it,
right.
but people should be allowed to drive however they see fit, and
Hmm.
then other people should be responsible enough to be like, oh, shoot, that's a road. And me being on that road means I can potentially get hit by this vehicle that's
Hmm.
going to kill me. What should I be doing? Look both fucking ways and pay attention and not be on my phone?
Right,
And I think that's a lesson. I mean, I remember learning that when I was 3 years old. Look both
right,
ways when you cross the road. 5 years old. It's enforced by the parents. Hey, look both ways. Hey, look both ways. Hey, look both ways.
hmm,
And that's what we're doing is we're just creating these things in society that are like these stop losses for parents to not be parents and teach
hmm,
the valuable lessons. The next thing that I want to hit on is 15-mile-an-hour school zones outside of a school where it's up there all day long or 35 miles an hour. It's like, why the fuck would a kid be hanging out by the fucking road?
right.
Sorry to cuss so much,
That's
but
right.
it really pisses me off. Why do I have to slow down to 15 miles an hour while I'm driving my vehicle on a 2-lane road?
Hmm.
Why do all of us have to do that? Why do we have to slow down?
Right. When
Why are
there are
there
no
kids out
children
there?
present. Yeah.
Why would there be a child out hanging by the road?
Hmm.
Explain this to me.
Right.
But what we've done in our society is we said, oh, this is the right thing to do. And it's like, well, what you're doing
Hmm.
is you're making people into retards.
Right.
Plain and simple.
Hmm.
Kids need to understand don't hang out by the road. Don't cross that street. That's a main freaking road, right?
Right.
Maybe make the school a little bit better because cars are going to beat human every single time. Same thing with motorcycle riders and bicyclists. Like, I hate to say it. You could sit here and bitch and moan. I used to ride motorcycles all the time. But
Yeah.
guess what, dude? Cars win, motorcycles don't.
Right.
Cars beat bicycle. Dude, rock, paper, scissors, bro. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's what I'm saying. Like, we need to
Right.
start having these conversations about
Yeah.
reality, right?
Yeah.
And sit there and we need to bestow blame upon the dum dum
Right.
and be like, "You're the fucking dum dum in this situation."
Hmm.
I hate to say it, but that's how reality is,
Right.
right?
Hmm. Yeah. There's a lot of different ways you can go with that whole conversation.
For sure.
Yeah. But
What
it,
else you want to know?
those, like you said, these are all conversations that we need to be having because we have gotten so far removed from all of this, which would at one point we would have thought is just common sense. Now it's some derogatory term we're just going to label it as so that it can conform to what somebody thinks the world should be like instead
For
of what it
sure.
actually
Well,
is.
I like to call it practical sense now
Hmm.
because practicality is going to beat out any form of uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Essentially, practicality is going to beat out any form of idealism that you have,
Hmm.
right? You can have it's the this is the way it should be versus this is the way it is, right?
Right,
Practicality is going to win every single time. The should is just a pipe dream.
right.
And it's funny because I'm sure, most people will paint me with an idealistic brush and say, oh, he holds these ideals of like what society should be.
Hmm.
And what I promote is I sit there and I say, it should be this way because this is more in line with God and nature's design.
Hmm.
And I think that's what we've gotten away from,
Right.
right? It's like we've created too um sterile slash not industrial. What's the word I'm looking for? It begins with a S. And it's like created in a lab. Synthetic. That's the word I'm looking for.
There you
We've
go.
created too synthetic of a human being.
Hmm.
And I think that's where people's true spiritual revolt lies in right now. Is it's like they're pushing back against this.
The Matrix.
I was just about to use that word.
Yeah,
That's exactly what it is.
yeah.
It's
Well,
funny because if you actually read where the Matrix, the movie, got their philosophy from,
hmm,
I think it was simulation and simulacra. That's what essentially I think it's Baudrillard. Most of his stuff is kind of stupid. But what he talks about is how we've created like a carbon copy of a carbon copy of a carbon copy to get to this point.
right.
And that's why people are rejecting it, is
Hmm.
because it's like if you try to carbon copy a carbon copy, it comes out weaker and then it comes out weaker and then it comes
Right.
out weaker.
Hmm.
And that's essentially what's going on. And that's what I would say cosmopolitan life
Hmm.
is this simulacra.
Right.
And that's why people are
So maybe this is a different way to think of it in that even going back to like the deep end fitness stuff, right? You can intellectualize something. You can say, I understand the concept, I understand the idea, but until you're actually doing it and until you face the reality of it,
mhm.
you don't know what it is.
This is why I say that pain is our greatest teacher.
Yeah.
And when we first started off here, I sat here and again, like I'm sitting here and I'm painting an idealistic brush of like, hey guys, we could go down this route and we could create this society and wouldn't it be great? But in my last 5 years of trying to do this, of
Hmm.
trying to push men to like, hey, let's go, let's build a community, let's do this stuff. What I've come to realize is that most people aren't going to come to these conclusions
Hmm.
until there's a serious amount of pain
Right.
in their face.
Right.
And unfortunately, that's going to kind of have to be the wake up call.
Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
And it's funny because, feminism was roaring and then COVID hit. And then all of a sudden you see these same feminists putting on freaking aprons and baking sourdough bread for TikTok at that point in time. Like, hey, and then of course, everything opened up and now they're freaking
Right.
proud again. But that was kind of a quick wake up call.
Right.
That's essentially what I'm saying right now, too, is, feminism is a first world problem. A lot of
Yes.
these things are all first world problems. And sometimes I think I, we might not have to have, we might, we're going to have to lose a lot of those safety nets before people are
Hmm.
willing to learn that lesson. But what I'm kind of proposing before that is, and this is the beautiful part about us connecting and, creating a good connection through deep end. And then from deep end, we're also branching out to all sorts of other people is it's like, hey, we're building that community of people right now that are
Hmm.
already on this plane of existence,
Hmm.
that are all wanting to build towards this, that are already prepared. And it's like when the time comes, it's going to be like, hey, when people come a knocking, it's like, hey, sorry, you weren't on the ship when it fucking set sail.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We got nothing for you.
Hmm.
So that's kind of the endeavor that I push to most people today. Like, If you're listening to this and you like what I have to say, if you're in the Scottsdale area, definitely come join the Deep End Fitness group.
Right.
Definitely come hang out with us. We're doing a lot of great stuff as far as community building, as far as doing other things outside of it. Going back to like what I was talking about earlier too. So I've written a couple books. I'm not going to promote those at all. But what I'm trying, where I'm going with that is like I used to talk a lot about the social sexual dynamics and then the philosophy of things and XYZ. And I used to actually be like a dating coach as well.
Really.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, but the big thing that I saw was so the reason why I got into the dating coach side of things is it's almost like the deep end side of things
Hmm.
where I can actually help build men's confidence and get them to want to become better men because most men in today's society have two main motivators to get better. It's money and women. And believe it or not, it's women. Right? Most people want to get the money so that they can get the women,
Right.
right? So it's women. So dating was a really good thing because I can motivate a man to dress better, to look better, to eat healthier, to get to the gym, to do harder things, and that could push them down that way if I just taught them also how to like talk to women and date women and
Hmm.
you know, like I said, we all want relationships and we all want certain things at the end of the day. If I can help move a guy in the direction of like, hey, what's your goal
Hmm.
with women in relationships? Okay, I can get you there. Long-term relationship, so on and so forth. But it also helped me with a lot of other things too as well. It wasn't until like COVID kicked off where, you know, I was part of a group of men that are actually pretty popular today. Myron Gaines runs Fresh and Fit. Rolo Tomasi's pretty popular today. A few other people I won't name. We'll just leave it out there. But I was part of this group of people that we were all discussing all these things. This was
Hmm.
2018, 2019. Then when COVID was coming down the pike, I sat there and I said, guys, this is going to get a little bit crazy.
Hmm.
I said, dating should not be your priority right now. We need to evolve beyond the two main things of making money and finding women. We need to
Hmm.
move into more masculine disciplines.
Hmm.
And that's when I kind of and that's what started the trajectory for me to turn off from those guys because they wanted to just stick with the dating and all that other stuff. And I was like, no, no, no. The three main masculine disciplines that men need to practice today is lifting, fighting, and shooting.
Okay.
Lift weights, learn to fight, learn to shoot,
Hmm.
right? That is going to turn you into a modern day warrior. If
Okay.
I'm being honest with you, right?
Right.
Lifting weights, getting more physical. You have to overcome adversity with lifting weights. It's going to make you stronger. You're going
Hmm.
to learn more about yourself. The fighting, very spiritual, along the same lines. 99% of any conflict that occurs is going to occur with hand to hand. You should be trained in that. Also, former CrossFitter, former Marine, stud in CrossFit 2014. Buddy hits me up and he's like, hey, come do jujitsu with me. And I'm just like, dude, I'm going to fucking destroy you. I'm like 257 pounds. I can deadlift 750. I can clean and jerk 450, something like that. It
Right.
was stupid, right? Super fast Fran time, blah, 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 blah. Go in and I fight this chubby purple belt. And 30 seconds in, I'm gasping for air after using all my energy. And I'm like, shit. I'm
Right.
like, shit, I could, again, masturbatory. I hate to say this. Don't get me wrong. There's a time and place for CrossFit, being
Hmm.
able to move weights over distances and time and all this other stuff.
Right.
Great. However, if you can't fight, you can't fucking fight. There's nothing that's going to supplement
Right.
fighting. You need to get in. You need to learn how to manipulate not just your body, but other people's bodies.
Hmm.
And then you need to get the mindset, grind set, lung capacity for a fight.
Hmm.
Because I guarantee you, most people out there that'll sit here and say to me, oh, Lysander, don't worry about me. I can fight. When a fight happens, I just turn red and I Hulk out, and all of a sudden it's like, dude, you're gonna Hulk out like a dum dum for 30 seconds.
Hmm.
I'm gonna take the barrage of whatever dumb shit you might try to do for the 30 seconds. Then you're gonna be winded, and guess what?
Right.
After that, it's time for daddy to eat because guess what? And I don't know if you've heard some stories about bears eating, but bears will eat you alive for an hour straight.
Yeah.
And guess what? I will enjoy my time with you. And you are not going to like it because it's going to be just like how you felt in the water, where you're like, oh my God, I'm fucked. This is not good. Right.
Right.
Like you're not going to have any railing to hang out on or any of that stuff. Right.
Right.
It's like, men, learn to fight.
Hmm.
It's not going to turn you into a bad person. I guarantee you learning to fight is going to make you a better person. I
Right.
guarantee you. Please no Krav Maga. Get into something where you're actually physically tangling with somebody. I'm a huge fan of jujitsu. I think
Yeah.
it's the best version for people to get into.
Hmm.
Muay Thai for stand up, absolutely. Boxing if you want to clean up the hands a little bit, but you got to learn how to grapple people. You got to
Hmm.
learn how to put hands on people. You got to learn how to close distance. You got to learn how to tie up. You got to learn how to move. You got to learn how to get those lungs there too and the mentality for it.
Right.
And then the shooting aspect. Why do I talk about the shooting? Because there are going to be 1% of dudes out there that are going to be better than you at fighting, and you want to shoot those motherfuckers, right?
Right.
Just in case, I'm saying
Right.
try to make them your friends
Yeah.
in all sense. But there are always going to be people out there that have bad intentions,
Right.
that are willing to do bad things and all that other stuff. The gun is the great equalizer. 110-pound woman could take a pistol and could put me down, right?
Right.
So those are the great equalizers. Those are the three great masculine disciplines that any man should be practicing right now.
Hmm.
I said this 3 years ago. I'm going to reiterate a few things or revamp a couple things. The pool.
Hmm.
It wasn't until I got in the pool that I realized that that was another great discipline to practice
Hmm.
with all the things that we talked about at the very beginning of this stuff.
Right.
Um, we go in the pool twice a week. We do a lot of crazy stuff in the pool, get to learn a lot of stuff while I'm in the water. And the great part is it doesn't hurt like jujitsu hurts.
Right.
Right. I hop in the pool for my recovery.
Hmm.
Now, granted, holding your breath
Hmm.
and doing some things at the bottom of the pool, 14 feet, and being under there for a little while, it hurts in different ways,
Hmm.
but it's not crushing my body. That's kind of crushing more my spirit and definitely my lungs, right? And
Right.
my lungs for sure, and my oxygen levels, but it's completely different.
Right.
Um, and I will say this, like the water, it does something to you.
Hmm.
It does something to you. It makes you tougher in a different way
Hmm.
because so used to being on the land.
Hmm.
We're so comfortable being on the
Right.
land. And it's like we forget, like, oh crap, that
Hmm.
that is very, very humbling.
Yes.
And it can very quickly take you under and own
Hmm.
you.
Yeah.
There's just something to it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's 100% impartial, and yeah, it doesn't care about anything.
No. It's nature.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
It's nature.
Hmm.
Nature has its own freaking rules, man.
Hmm.
And it's like, and that's the beauty of it, is it gives you that reminder.
Right.
Gives you that quick reminder of like,
Hmm.
you're not in charge.
Hmm.
You're not in charge.
Right.
If we want to take you, we will take you at any second.
Hmm.
Yeah.
There you go.
Mm.
That's a good lesson for people to learn. But anyway, I think that's a good place for us to wrap up. That
I'm
was an
happy.
excellent
Yeah.
conversation.
Thanks.
Yeah. I'm really glad you could like come back in and like talk more about that. And I would love even to have you again, like talk more about like, cause you and Byron and I have talked about like creating some sort of a mentorship program
For
and
sure.
how we develop that and kind of carry that idea forward.
Well, the beautiful part about that too is I've kind of laid out how the mentorship should be.
Hmm.
That's what we just discussed in the sense of like, and if you're on board with this, I would love to sit down. Hey, let's iron things out. Let's turn this in something that's palpable, that can be
Hmm.
prescribed, that can be given. Shit. Why not move into maybe like a charter school down the road or something like
Right.
that, right?
Yeah.
We'll see, right? But like curriculum and no kidding, like that's
Yeah.
how we do business. But I'm on board with that, and I think that's the purpose of all this stuff is to go from there.
Hmm.
Yeah,
That would be awesome.
wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And like incorporate getting in the pool, incorporate fighting, incorporate
Hmm. Yeah. All the things we just talked about.
everything. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Sick.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah,
Or I
it's
should
gonna
say
be
it will
amazing.
be.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. All right.
Cool.
Well, thank you again. I'm
No
glad you could
worries.
make it. I greatly appreciate your time and I appreciate all the lessons you helped me learn in the pool. I'm sure there'll be more to follow.
Absolutely.
So,
We'll see you in the pool.
absolutely. All right, then. Hi, everybody. Thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, you can now support the Non-Victim Nation by donating via listener support directly on Spotify. Remember, the story of your life is being written right now, and you are the hero.